It started with a howl. Not just any howl, the kind that raises goosebumps on the back of your neck. It echoed over the cornfields behind the farmhouse, a mournful, guttural cry that sounded like it didn't belong in this world. At first, Daniel thought it might have been a coyote, but this sound was deeper, older, angry. The Wilkins farm had always been isolated. Acres of corn stretched for miles in all directions, and the nearest neighbor was a 10-minute drive away. Daniel moved there with his wife, Laura, and their 8-year-old daughter, Ellie, after inheriting the land from his late uncle, Henry Wilkins. The property came with more than just fields, it came with an old, creaking farmhouse, a collapsing barn, and local legends no one dared mention aloud. The townsfolk had a nickname for the place, Dog's End. Daniel first heard it in hushed whispers at the gas station. An old man with skin like leather looked him straight in the eyes and muttered, "You don't want to be on that land when the wind carries the howl." He laughed it off. Superstition. But now, as the wind moaned through the corn and that unholy howling rose again, Daniel didn't feel like laughing. It was almost midnight. Laura had gone to bed hours ago, and Ellie was asleep in her room, curled up with her favorite stuffed bear. Daniel stood on the back porch with a flashlight, aiming its weak beam into the sea of corn that stretched beyond the fence. The howl came again, closer this time. It was joined by others. A chorus of growls and wails rose from the darkness, as if dozens of beasts prowled just out of sight. Daniel's blood turned cold. He stepped down from the porch, boots crunching the dry earth, and aimed the flashlight toward the tree line. The corn swayed, but the wind had stopped. Something was moving in there. A shape darted between the stalks, low, fast, and silent. Daniel turned the flashlight, but it was gone. Another shape rushed behind him, followed by a sharp clicking sound, like claws on wood. He spun around, heart hammering, only to see the back porch swing creaking eerily. Then he heard Ellie's scream. Daniel bolted inside, tearing through the hallway. Laura was already out of bed, her face pale and terrified. They burst into Ellie's room together. She was standing on the bed, crying, pointing at the window. "I saw them," she sobbed. "They were outside. Big dogs, but not normal dogs. Their eyes were glowing, Daddy. They were watching me." Daniel rushed to the window and threw it open. Nothing. Just the night. He turned to comfort his daughter, but something didn't feel right. The air in the room was heavy, suffocating. Laura held Ellie, whispering that it was just a nightmare. But Daniel knew better. In the morning, he found tracks beneath Ellie's window. Paw prints, but massive, nearly the size of dinner plates. Deep grooves in the dirt showed where something had stood on 2 legs, then 4, then 2 again. They didn't speak of it. Not yet. But it got worse. That afternoon, the barn door slammed shut on its own. Inside, Daniel found claw marks on the wooden beams, fresh and deep, as if something had tried to dig its way in, or out. The air stank of wet fur and decay. At dinner, Laura mentioned the legends she'd heard in town. About the Wilkins family and the pact. Apparently, Uncle Henry had been part of something old. A ritual, maybe. No one knew the details, only that his land was cursed. "They say the Wilkins bloodline feeds them," Laura whispered, glancing toward Ellie. Daniel dropped his fork. That night, the howling returned, closer. The cries were no longer distant. They came from inside the corn. Ellie had nightmares of dogs with broken jaws and torn flesh, their bodies twisted like they'd been mangled and rebuilt. She said they whispered her name. Daniel stayed awake, shotgun in hand. At 3:33 a.m., the porch light flickered. Something was on the roof. He stepped outside, flashlight aimed upward. For a split second, he saw it. A dog, but impossibly large, with legs too long for its body and a jaw that stretched far beyond nature's design. Its eyes were pale white. No pupils. No soul. It watched him, and grinned. Then it vanished, leaping silently into the dark. The next morning, Daniel found long claw marks running across the shingles. Patches of fur littered the roof, black, matted, and reeking of rot. Laura wanted to leave. "I can't stay here another night, Dan. This place, it's wrong. I don't care what inheritance we lose. I want out." But they couldn't. The truck wouldn't start. The phone lines were dead. And the nearest road was 5 miles of dirt and woods. They were trapped. That night, Ellie spoke in her sleep. Strange words, in a language none of them recognized. Her voice sounded older. As Daniel leaned in to listen, her eyes snapped open, pure white like the creature's. "They're here, Daddy," she said in a deep, gravelly voice. "They've come to collect." Outside, the dogs howled again. But this time, they were at the door. The scratching started just after 1 a.m. It wasn't loud at first, just a faint, rhythmic sound beneath the old wooden floor, like something clawing slowly, deliberately, from below. Daniel lay awake in bed, one arm around Laura, both of them frozen, listening. Scratch. 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 It was coming from beneath Ellie's room. He slipped out of bed and grabbed the shotgun again. Laura followed silently, barefoot, the floorboards groaning under her weight as they crept down the hallway. Ellie's door was slightly ajar. Daniel pushed it open and found her asleep, peacefully, this time, her chest rising and falling in slow rhythm. But the scratching continued. Daniel knelt near the bed and pressed his ear to the floor. It was louder now, closer. Whatever was underneath them was trying to get in. He tapped lightly on the wood. Instantly, the scratching stopped. Then a soft growl came in response. Daniel recoiled, heart pounding, and pulled Ellie into his arms. She stirred, groggy but calm, as if none of this bothered her. "I heard them," she mumbled. "They're in the house now." Daniel didn't answer. He carried her to their bedroom, barricaded the door with a chair, and sat with the shotgun resting in his lap until sunrise. By morning, the claw marks were visible. Deep gashes ran along the bottom of Ellie's wall. Beneath her bed, the wooden planks were warped, cracked in the center, as though something had tried to push its way through. Daniel pried up a floorboard and peered into the crawlspace. What he saw made his blood run cold. Dozens of paw prints coated the dirt, each one larger than the last. Tufts of greasy black fur were scattered in piles. But it wasn't just fur. Bones. Tiny bones. A ribcage. A malformed skull with canine teeth far too large for the size of its head. Some had symbols carved into them, sigils that seemed to pulse faintly in the dim light. Laura stood behind him, her face pale and sick. "We need to burn it. All of it." Daniel nodded. They spent the rest of the morning pouring gasoline into the crawlspace, the barn, and the base of the old corn silo. When the sun reached its peak, Daniel struck a match and tossed it in. The fire roared. Smoke filled the air as the crawlspace ignited, flames devouring the cursed space beneath their home. Daniel and Laura held each other as the heat radiated through the floorboards. Ellie watched from the porch, unmoved, her face blank and strange. But that night, the scratching returned. This time it came from inside the walls. Laura screamed when she saw the silhouette move behind the wallpaper in the living room, something long and sinewy slinking between the wooden slats. Daniel fired the shotgun, blasting a hole through the wall, but nothing was there, just claw marks on the insulation and a foul, hot breath that lingered in the air. Then the barking started. Low, guttural, and unnatural. Not one dog. Not two. A chorus. Daniel ran outside and stopped cold. They were in the cornfield. Dozens of them. Twisted, mangled hounds with patchy fur and bloated, unnatural limbs. Some crawled. Some walked upright. Their eyes glowed milky white in the moonlight, and every one of them stared at the farmhouse. The largest of them, nearly the size of a man, stepped forward. Its jaw unhinged with a grotesque crack, and it let out a howl so deep it shook the windows. Behind him, the corn bent outward, not from wind, but from movement. Something massive was coming. Daniel ran back inside and locked every door. Laura clutched Ellie, sobbing. The air had gone ice cold. Then came the thumping. From the basement. Boom. 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 Like something huge was slamming against the foundation. "There's no way they're down there," Laura whispered. But they were. The thumping grew louder. Daniel rushed to the basement door, pressing his ear to it. A wet panting noise came from the other side, followed by soft, human-like laughter. Not adult laughter. A child's. Suddenly, Ellie stepped forward and placed her hand on the door. "I can hear them too," she said, smiling. "They said I'm one of them now." Daniel yanked her back. "Don't talk like that. They're family, Daddy." The door shook violently. Daniel aimed the shotgun, hands trembling. Whatever was on the other side slammed against the wood again, splinters flying. Laura screamed. From the far end of the hall, the living room wall exploded outward, spraying dust and wood as a long, black-furred limb reached inside. Its claws scraped along the floor as it pulled its bloated body through the hole, jaw gaping. Daniel fired. The blast tore into the creature's chest, but it didn't even flinch. It tilted its head, mouth stretching wider in mock amusement. Then it barked. The sound wasn't just loud, it was unbearable, a frequency that rattled teeth and made the lights flicker. Ellie laughed, swaying in her mother's arms. Daniel pulled them both into the kitchen and slammed the door. "We have to get to the barn," he shouted. "There's a trapdoor in the floor, I saw it yesterday. What if it leads to them?" Laura cried. Daniel looked into her eyes. "I know. But it may be our only chance." Outside, the barking multiplied, joined by growls, scratching, and the creak of the front door slowly giving way. As Daniel opened the back door, Ellie whispered one final thing. "They were never outside, Daddy. They've always been under us." The trapdoor in the barn was older than the house itself. Hidden beneath rotting hay and a layer of filth, it was secured with rusted chains and sealed with melted wax along its edges, wax marked with ancient symbols no one in the family could recognize. Daniel had seen it the day they moved in, but hadn't thought much of it. Now it was their only hope. Outside, the dogs surrounded the house. Their shadows moved in twisted patterns under the moonlight, elongated, unnatural, as though their bodies obeyed different laws. The barn offered temporary refuge, but even that was fragile. Daniel, Laura, and Ellie stood around the trapdoor, breathless. The air inside the barn smelled of wet fur, iron, and something spoiled, like meat left in the sun for weeks. "We go down," Daniel whispered, gripping the shotgun. "It's this or we wait for them to rip the place apart." "But Ellie said," Laura began. "They're everywhere. Inside the walls, under the house. Maybe down there, there's a way out." Ellie tilted her head and smiled. "They're waiting for us." Daniel hesitated, staring into his daughter's eyes. Something behind them shimmered. Not light, movement. Her pupils weren't black anymore, they swirled with cloudy gray, like a storm. With trembling hands, Daniel ripped the chains away and cracked open the trapdoor. A gust of hot air surged upward, thick with moisture and the stink of decay. The stairs leading down were carved from packed earth, descending into suffocating blackness. Daniel led the way, flashlight trembling in his hand. Laura followed close behind, holding Ellie tightly. The further they descended, the more the walls changed. The dirt shifted to stone, ancient, slick, covered in scratch marks and crude carvings of hounds. Some had multiple heads. Some were eyeless. All were howling. The echo of dripping water, or perhaps blood, guided them deeper. Then they heard it. Whimpering. Not human. Not dog. Something in between. They reached a vast underground chamber. It looked like a kennel, but one designed by a mad god. Dozens of rusted cages lined the walls, their bars bent outward, as if whatever had been trapped inside had escaped. Bones littered the floor, some canine, others unmistakably human. One cage still held a creature. It crouched in the far corner, shivering. Daniel approached, gun raised. It looked like a dog at first, matted fur, thin legs, tail curled beneath it. But then it turned to face him. Its eyes were human. Its mouth opened, revealing a full set of blunt human teeth, rotting and cracked. It whimpered and coughed out something that sounded horrifyingly like a word. Help! Laura screamed and backed away. Ellie stepped forward and placed her hand on the cage. It's just a pup, she said gently. He didn't listen to them. Daniel yanked her back. The creature began slamming its head into the bars, shrieking in a twisted voice. They made me eat it. They made me eat my name. Its skin began to peel back, revealing coarse black fur beneath. Bones cracked. Its spine extended. The transformation was grotesque and irreversible. Within seconds, it was no longer a malformed hybrid, it was one of them. It snapped the cage door clean off. Daniel fired. The shell tore through the beast's face, splattering the back wall. The air trembled with a deep howl from further down the tunnel. It answered the shot. Then another howl. Then another. They were coming. Run! Daniel shouted. They sprinted through the kennel chamber into another corridor, this one lined with murals. The walls pulsed. Grotesque paintings of rituals covered every surface, people kneeling before massive dogs with burning eyes, infants cradled in mangled jaws, symbols etched in blood around fire pits. The murals moved as they passed, limbs stretching, mouths opening in silent screams, watching. Then the floor gave way. Daniel fell first, crashing through brittle stone and landing hard on a fleshy, slick surface. Laura and Ellie tumbled after him, the trapdoor vanishing above them like a memory. They were in the heart. A massive, pulsing chamber that felt alive. The floor was soft and veined. Huge black dog statues lined the perimeter, mouths open in permanent snarls. Between them, a pit boiled, bubbling black tar with bone fragments floating within. And from the pit rose something. A hound, but unlike any they'd seen. It stood on two legs, its body twisted and burned, ribs exposed. It wore a crown of human teeth strung together with sinew, and its face was stitched with dozens of human mouths, each one whispering. Whimpering. Pleading. It stared directly at Ellie. Laura screamed and held her, but Ellie didn't resist. She stepped forward, entranced. I remember now, she said, eyes glowing silver. I was born to lead them. Daniel reached for her, but she turned with inhuman speed. Daddy, no. With a flick of her hand, Daniel was flung back, slammed against the wall. The shotgun clattered to the floor. The crowned beast bowed its head to Ellie. And she howled, a shrill, piercing cry that echoed through the chamber like a war horn. From the shadows, dozens of beasts emerged. They bowed too. They had waited long enough. Laura collapsed in sobs. No, please. Ellie. But Ellie was no longer a little girl. Her skin cracked, black fur pushing through. Her teeth extended, her fingers curved into claws. Ellie's gone, she said in a voice layered with growls. There's only the pack now. Daniel screamed. Daniel woke choking on dirt. His lungs burned, throat torn raw from screaming. All around him was silence, thick, unnatural silence, as if the underground had swallowed even the idea of sound. The flesh-like chamber was gone. The pit, the beast, the pack. Ellie, all vanished. He lay alone in a cold, stone corridor, lit only by the faint, sickly green glow seeping from the cracked walls. For a moment, he thought it had been a dream. A psychotic, blood-wet nightmare. But when he looked down, he saw his hands were smeared with dark, tarry blood. His nails were cracked. His side ached from where Ellie, or whatever she had become, threw him against the wall. And Laura? Where was Laura? He shouted. His voice echoed endlessly, swallowed by the darkness. No answer. He staggered to his feet, dragging himself along the wall, deeper into the tunnel that now pulsed with faint vibrations, like a giant creature breathing below the earth. His mind raced. He had to get back to the surface, back to daylight, back to the world where monstrous dogs didn't wear crowns of teeth and little girls didn't speak in voices that weren't their own. As he moved forward, the walls began to change again. The stone was now carved into enormous reliefs, depictions of humans kneeling, offering up flesh and children to towering, skeletal hounds. Eyes gouged out. Tongues torn. In every scene, the dogs feasted while the people smiled, blind and devoted. And beneath it all, words in a language that twisted his stomach when he tried to read them. All shall be dog. Daniel stumbled into a wider space where torches burned with green flames. The air was warmer, sickly sweet, filled with an overwhelming stench of decay and fur. He could hear them again. Scratching. Faint. Rhythmic. As if claws were being dragged along the stone just out of sight. He ducked into a side tunnel and found himself in a narrow passage filled with cages. Most were broken, the iron twisted and melted as though something had chewed through it. But one still held its occupant. A man. Or at least, what used to be one. His face was torn and stretched, his eyes hollow and drooping, his skin marked with deep bite scars. His jaw moved constantly, as if chewing on invisible meat. But when he saw Daniel, he stopped. You don't have the mark, he rasped. What? You're not blessed. Not yet. They'll find you. They smell fear, and doubt. Daniel approached cautiously. How do I get out? How do I get back up? The man laughed, but it came out as a wet cough. There is no up. This is the underkennel. The first of many. It goes deeper. And if you don't give yourself to the pack, they will take you apart and rebuild you. Daniel gritted his teeth. Then I'll fight them. The man leaned forward, pressing his shredded face against the bars. There is no fighting gods, boy. Suddenly, he screamed in agony. His spine snapping, bones cracking as his face elongated, his fingers shriveling into paws. His tongue lolled out, eyes turning black. Within seconds, a dog stood where the man had been, drooling and twitching with hunger. It hurled itself against the bars, snarling. Daniel ran. He sprinted down the corridor, heartbeat deafening. The growls behind him grew louder. More joined. Dozens. Hundreds. From the walls. From beneath the floor. He found a ladder. Set into the stone wall like an afterthought. He didn't stop to think. He climbed. Clawed his way up with bloodied fingers. The howls rose behind him like a tidal wave. The ladder ended at a trapdoor. He pushed with everything he had. It gave. He emerged into his own kitchen. But the world wasn't the same. The light outside the window was dim and amber, like eternal dusk. The sky swirled with dark clouds, and the trees were motionless, as if holding their breath. Silence blanketed the room, thicker than before. Laura was there. Sitting at the table. Alive. Laura, he choked out, racing toward her. But when she turned, his heart stopped. Her eyes were milky white, and her mouth, stitched closed with black thread. She raised a trembling hand, pointing to the hallway. "Where's Ellie?" he asked. She couldn't answer. Her eyes rolled back, and she collapsed, twitching, onto the floor. Daniel turned toward the hallway. A low growl came from the shadows. Then the sound of padded feet. Ellie stepped out. Or, what Ellie had become. Her hair hung in matted clumps, her limbs longer than they should be. Her face was halfway between human and canine, stretched and twitching. Her smile was too wide, filled with jagged teeth. "You came back," she whispered. Daniel stepped back, trembling. "I'm still your father." She shook her head slowly. "You were. But now you will serve. You'll run. Hunt. Howl. Forever." Behind her, dogs emerged from the walls, phasing through them like smoke. Their bodies were malformed, covered in scars and mouths and eyes. They surrounded him. "Make him kneel," Ellie said. And they leapt. He screamed. Daniel awoke to a wet, hot breath on his neck. He was lying face down on dirt. Cold. Shivering. The thick scent of iron and filth hung in the air. Around him, there were whimpers, growls, the sound of nails scratching stone and flesh being torn. His vision was blurry, his left eye swollen nearly shut. His hands were bound behind his back, not with rope, but sinew. Tendons. Human or canine, he didn't know. He didn't want to know. He lifted his head. They were everywhere. Dozens of dogs. All wrong. All twisted. Some crawled on too many legs. Others had human hands instead of paws. Some had the blank faces of mannequins stretched over canine skulls. They circled the space like priests at a ceremony, silent, reverent, waiting. In the center of the chamber was an altar made of bones. Shining white. Polished. It pulsed faintly with heat and blood. On it sat Ellie, cross-legged, smiling. Her eyes were glowing yellow now. Her teeth were fangs. Her fingers ended in claws. And she wore a crown. A crown made of tongues, still moving. "Daddy's awake," she cooed. "We were worried you might die before the ritual. But the pack wants you. They said you're strong. You'll be a beautiful beast." He struggled against the sinew. His wrists bled. The dogs around him growled in warning. "What is this?" he rasped. Ellie stood, stepping barefoot across the bone altar. Every footfall echoed with the sound of flesh splitting. "This is the gift. The blessing. You'll run with the pack. You'll taste the skin of the world and howl in the cities when the time comes. You're not my daughter." She tilted her head. "No. But I remember her. She screamed a lot, before she stopped. You should have screamed with her. You could have gone together." From the shadows, robed figures emerged. They weren't dogs. They weren't quite human either. Their faces were covered with the stretched skins of canines, stitched to their flesh. Their hands trembled as they carried bowls filled with black ichor. One stepped forward and pressed a bloody paw print to Daniel's forehead, chanting in a gurgling, breathless voice. "Flesh is leash. Bone is collar. Blood is command. Run, and become." Daniel writhed. His skin began to burn. The mark on his head pulsed like it was alive. His vision blurred, then clarified. Everything was too bright. Too loud. He heard every breath. Every heartbeat. Every whimper. They were changing him. Inside. A growl escaped his throat before he could stop it. "No," he whispered. "No, I'm not one of you." Ellie leapt down from the altar and crouched before him, nose inches from his. "You already are," she purred. You just forgot. But don't worry. The ritual will help you remember your true face. One of the robed figures brought out a long shard of bone, sharpened to a blade. It pressed it to Daniel's chest. Where the fur begins, Ellie whispered. The blade sliced. Pain exploded through his body. He screamed, writhing, as blood poured down his stomach. The robed figure reached into the wound with shaking hands and began pulling. Not organs. Not flesh. Hair. Thick, coarse black fur growing from inside him, like it had always been there. Like he was just a sheath. A disguise. His skin began to slough off in patches, revealing the thing beneath. His howls mixed with the chanting. The pack surrounded him, tongues hanging, eyes wide with hunger and awe. Ellie leaned in. Soon you'll run beside me, Daddy. You'll smell the fear of the world. We'll take the streets. The cities. The schools. We'll eat everything. Everyone. It's almost time. He bit down hard on his own tongue, snapping himself out of the rising madness. He rolled to the side, still bound, and smashed into one of the bone torch holders. It fell and burst into flames. The green fire licked the floor, igniting the ropes of flesh, the altar. Screaming erupted. Dogs yelped. Robed figures shrieked in their distorted voices. Ellie screamed like a beast trapped in a burning kennel. Daniel ran. Through fire and howling and chaos. He tore his bindings on jagged rock, peeling skin from his wrists. Blood poured. But he kept running. Through the tunnels. The walls pulsed. The ceiling cracked. The kennel was falling apart. Or waking up. Behind him, the sound of claws echoed, faster and louder. He climbed. He clawed. Until he found the broken remains of the ladder again, now slick with blood. He climbed one-handed, gripping with bone-deep determination. At the top, the trapdoor. He shoved. It opened. Light. Not daylight. But a flickering, gray-blue light like a television screen in a dead city. He crawled through, and found himself back on the street. But the world had changed. Every building was covered in fur and bone. Cars lay overturned, clawed to ruin. The sky pulsed red with a sun that didn't burn. And in the distance, he saw them. Packs. Running. Through neighborhoods. Through cities. People being dragged down, torn apart. Their screams short-lived. Their skin peeled like wrapping. Dogs wearing their faces howled up at the sky. Daniel dropped to his knees. The ritual hadn't been meant to prevent the invasion. It was the signal. The pack was free. And he had brought them to the surface. Daniel wandered the streets like a ghost, barefoot and blood-soaked. The city he knew was unrecognizable, a twisted shell pulsing with unnatural life. The air smelled like hot fur and rotten teeth. Buildings throbbed, windows blinked, and alleyways growled. The pack had taken the world. And they were still changing it. At every corner, he saw people being hunted, not just torn apart but converted. Skin peeled off and replaced with twitching pelts. Eyes gouged and replaced with glimmering canine orbs. Their mouths stretched into slavering maws. They didn't die. They became part of the pack. He hid in the remains of a boarded-up convenience store. Shelves were overturned, the floor stained with trails of blood and hair. A radio on the counter sputtered static, then the occasional voice. Not safe, dogs in the walls, don't fall asleep, they come when you. The voice cut off with a wet crunch. Daniel collapsed behind the counter and closed his eyes. His body screamed from the inside out. The mark on his forehead still burned, seeping black fluid. His chest wound had sealed itself, not stitched, not scarred, but grown over with a patch of black fur. He was turning. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw her. Ellie. Not as she was, but as she became. Smiling with a mouth full of teeth that didn't fit. Her crown of tongues wagging like wind chimes. Her little hands clawing through the chests of the innocent, ripping out humanity one heart at a time. He shook the vision away. Focus. He needed to stay awake. There was a ticking in the walls. Not a clock. Not a machine. Nails. Clicking. Scratching. Pacing. He blinked. Then darkness. Not just sleep, blackout. When he woke, it was night. Somehow darker than the underground. Everything outside the store was silent. No sirens. No screams. Just breathing. Not his own. Slow, heavy panting. He sat up fast, and froze. They were inside. Dozens of them. Crawling silently through the aisles. Some upright, others on all fours. Their limbs were longer now, their fur slick with what looked like oil and blood. One of them had a human baby's face with dog jaws bursting out the cheeks. Another dragged a chain of human spines clattering behind it. They hadn't seen him yet. They didn't see. They smelled. Daniel held his breath. But the mark on his forehead began to pulse. He's awake, one whispered in a low growl that came from multiple mouths. They turned in unison. Their heads twitching. Their eyes gleaming. And then they spoke, not barked, but spoke. Daniel, they hissed together. You've slept. You've changed. You're one of us now. No, he rasped. But it was true. His fingers had claws now. His skin was tighter, itching. His ears could hear their breathing from 30 feet away. He could even smell their fear, or joy, or hunger. He bolted. They shrieked and gave chase, galloping on malformed limbs that slapped the tile like wet meat. He slammed through the back door and into the alley, scaling the dumpster and hoisting himself onto a low roof. The creatures didn't follow. They just stood in the alley, smiling. We'll wait, one whispered. We always wait. You can't fight what's inside. And then they were gone. Like smoke. Or memory. Daniel ran. Through the carcass of the city. Toward the blinking sign of a motel in the distance. It still had power, somehow. Maybe a generator. Maybe luck. Or maybe a trap. He didn't care. He needed rest. A real room. A locked door. A moment of peace. Inside the motel, there was no receptionist. Just a blood-smeared bell on the desk and a key hanging on the wall marked Room 6. He took it. The hallway was long. Carpet soaked with something sticky. Fluorescent lights above blinked in stuttering patterns. He unlocked Room 6. No monsters. No blood. Just a bed. A bathroom. A cracked mirror. He stared at his reflection. He no longer looked human. The fur was spreading. His eyes were golden. His teeth sharper. Something inside his throat growled even when he was silent. He lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I'm still me, he whispered. I'm still me. But the ceiling tiles began to tremble. From above came soft scratching. Then louder. Claws. Dozens. Hundreds. The light flickered. The mirror cracked again, from the inside. He ran to the door. Locked. He hadn't locked it. He hadn't. The walls breathed in. And began to bark. Low, rumbling, deep-throated sounds. Coming from within the drywall. He backed into the corner as the bed split in half and a snout emerged from the mattress. Then a paw from the vent. A tail from the toilet. They weren't coming through the room. The room was made of them. Everything. The walls. The bed. The light fixtures. The furniture. All dogs. Living. Watching. Breathing. And they closed in. You are Pack, the walls whispered. You are dreaming. And we are inside your head. Daniel screamed and closed his eyes. Only to open them in the same room. Morning. Sunlight. The dogs were gone. No fur. No blood. Just a quiet, normal motel room. Had it been a dream? No. His reflection still stared back from the mirror. Fangs. Fur. Yellow eyes. But something had changed. There were bites on his arms now. Circular. Perfect. Deep. And on the wall above the bed, smeared in blood, were the words. Tonight, we hunt the world. The sky cracked open. That's how it began. A thunderless tear across the heavens, like the fabric of the world had split. Through the gash came a light, not divine, not hopeful, but slick, red, and pulsing like the inside of a living wound. And from that sky wound fell them. Not dogs. Not anymore. They had grown. Evolved. Ascended. Daniel stood in a motel parking lot, staring up at the horror spilling down like a plague. Cities below writhed. Streets transformed. Trees split open like veins, and every living thing gave a final scream before turning into something else. People ran, but the dogs were faster. People hid, but the dogs were already inside. It was the night of teeth. And the Pack had come to finish what they started. Daniel staggered through the crimson rain. The ground pulsed under his feet. The air howled, thick with barking, wailing, and laughter. Buildings had become kennels of flesh. Concrete dripped fur. Streetlights blinked with yellow, canine eyes. Entire highways were paved in bones, still fresh and twitching. Some humans begged. Others dropped to all fours and welcomed the transformation. Daniel? He was somewhere in between. His body rebelled, fur had consumed half his torso, his fingers ended in sharp black talons, and his jaw clicked unnaturally wide when he spoke. Yet inside, some fragile piece of his humanity screamed. Fought. But that voice grew fainter. Because Ellie was back. He saw her, floating, not walking, above the city. Her limbs long and jointless, her face an inverted snout with teeth where her eyes should be. From her back dangled dozens of tails, each ending in a mouth. Daniel, she cooed, her voice layered with howls and sobs. You're beautiful now. He turned to run, but where could he go? There was no more escape. The earth cracked open, revealing tunnels teeming with black-furred monsters. Some had 3 heads. Some had none. Some dragged human torsos as toys, still twitching. Others sang in wet, gurgling howls that made Daniel's ears bleed. And then the song changed. It became a command. Sleep. That's what they whispered now. Sleep, and become. Daniel fell to his knees. The temptation was enormous. To let go. To join the pack. To stop running and finally be something greater. He closed his eyes. Warmth washed over him. He could smell everything, the blood in the soil, the fear in the air, the heartbeat of the world itself. He could hear every whisper, every bark, every name ever spoken by a dog since time began. He was at the edge of eternity. And then. A sound. A different one. A bell. Sharp. Pure. Like a caller. Like a memory. Like home. Daniel's eyes snapped open. He wasn't in the nightmare city anymore. He was in his childhood backyard. The sun was out. Grass underfoot. And there, bounding toward him, was Rusty. His dog. Alive. Wagging. Barking that goofy bark. Daniel dropped to his knees as Rusty leapt into his arms, licking his face. Covering him in joy and spit. Rusty, Daniel sobbed. You're here. But then Rusty stopped licking. And said, in a voice so human it shattered the sky. You left the door open, Daniel. You invited them in. Daniel looked up. The sky was cracking again. This time from inside. Rusty melted in his arms. Hair, skin, teeth, paws, becoming black fluid, leaking into the grass. The world around him twisted. Bark peeled back to reveal screaming faces. The grass writhed with tiny mouths whispering his name. Daniel screamed. And fell back into the real world. Or what was left of it. The city was gone. Just a sea of fur, bone, and howling. A planet consumed by dogs that were no longer dogs. They stood upright now. Draped in skin. Carrying bones as scepters. And in the center, Ellie stood at her throne of gnawed skulls. Daniel, she whispered. Come home. He staggered toward her. His legs no longer human. His breath came in snarls. His hands, paws. He tried to remember words. Memories. But they were ashes. There was only the pack. And the pack was all. Ellie reached out, placing a paw over his heart. You never left, she said. You were always one of us. You just forgot. Daniel opened his mouth. And howled. It split the sky. The last human sound ever made. Some say if you walk the ruins of the city now, what's left of it, you can still hear barking from under the earth. Some say the dogs are still there, waiting. And if you sleep with the window open. If your dreams turn red. If you hear paws in the hallway. It means they've found you. Because the pack never ends. It only grows. And you, dear reader. You left the door open. The end.